So, we're going to start the webinar, Making Enterprise Application Projects a Human Experience to Remember. This is another event hosted by Julhiet Sterwen Switzerland. Welcome everybody. I'm Stefan Wagner, partner at Julhiet Sterwen Switzerland, a consultancy firm based in Nyon. And we are focusing on helping organizations in their transformation. Today we are broadcasting from Kudelski Group headquarters at Cheseaux, near Lausanne in Switzerland. I'm very pleased and honored to present this webinar with Michel Wermelinger. He is VP Enterprise Business Applications at Kudelski Group. Michel has been managing a major worldwide business applications project supported by a Julhiet Sterwen project and change management team. I could say that we had a really interesting voyage together. Many conversations about change management. We shared previous experiences from previous companies and finally thought it would be interesting to present some of the outcomes of our discussions. That's basically the starting point for this webinar. So, Michel, can you tell us a few words about yourself, your organization, and the company?
Okay, thank you, Stefan, for inviting me to this webinar. So my name, as said, is Michel Wermelinger. I'm working for Kudelski Group since more than 20 years. Mostly of my career in the business side, so I'm not coming from an IT background. And I've been asked a few years ago to drive this project exactly for that reason, in order to bridge between IT world and the business world. So Kudelski Group, in 2 words, it's 3 different sectors of activity. The first one, digital TV, where we put our technology to the service of access control and digital rights management. The famous example is the Canal Plus decoder that most of you know, that we have built 20 years ago, and then we capitalized on this experience. The second area is IoT and cyber security, with our Kudelski security divisions. So we help large enterprise and public sectors to maintain effective their cybersecurity and protect their assets. And the third one is ski data. So we manufacture access control system for ticketing, ski resorts, parkings, and airports, and so on. So that's a quick overview of the group. Mm-hmm. Regarding the project, the project was a migration from several enterprise business application called EBA system to one unified environment. So including CRM, ERP, and BI. It's a 4 years worldwide project covering 30 legal entities in the group, roughly, with more than 2,000 people. Being a worldwide project, we had to address many local specificities within one common solution. This means a high amount of change impacting people that we most probably underestimated at the beginning. That's when we decided to increase our change management effort, bringing external expertise.
Okay, thanks, Michel. Well, the point you mentioned, that's very common in large-scale business application projects. Organizations tend to underestimate the impact of projects of this magnitude. So today, we'll start and giving for all the people that are in that webinar an idea of what we're going to cover. We'll start by investigating why the impact of the change comes as a surprise. Then look at the underlying reasons, share our experience on addressing that through a change design framework, and we'll be focusing on those aspects that help make a project a human experience to remember. We'll take your questions at the end, so please you can also use the chat functionality. It will be a little panel on the right to ask your questions, and in the middle of the webinar we'll also have another interaction where we will ask you a question. And then if everything works right, which I hope, you will see a little pop-up on the right with a poll, and you can be able to answer that question. So I think we are ready to start. What is it that causes that surprise effect in enterprise business applications projects? Well, discussing with Michel, we decided to settle for that what people expect and get usually is a complex operational and technical project. What they don't expect and they discover the hard way is that those projects are highly emotional projects that can really shake the whole organization. And we found out that there are a lot of reasons that can explain why these kind of projects are so highly emotionally taxing.
Yes, exactly, Stefan. So those projects are big investment for the company. So they are critical to give a company a competitive advantage. Therefore, there's also big pressure on the team realizing the project. So that being said, the complexity of those projects is not only IT related, so technical, but it's also a crossroad of system, process, and people. So to increase the change of success, you need to make a collective business project as opposed to an IT project in order to break down the silos between those two worlds.
Do you think that's why Kudelski Group selected business-oriented profile as yours?
That was one of the main reasons, yes, exactly.
Interesting. The third one, people are really impacted by this kind of project. They impacted in the way they work, which is very personal, relates to very personal feelings. So there's a big challenge to anticipate and address these changes and to have the good kind of conversations around these subjects with the people early on in order to avoid misconceptions. Because what we see very often on those kinds of projects is that there is an overestimation of the magnitude of the change. And finally, through discussions early on, you can really show also what remains stable in that kind of projects.
So with the move to the cloud, we also see a change in the way of working within IT and business. So we are not mastering anymore our infrastructure or software. So this increase really the pace of new functionality and change in the software deployed by the manufacturers. And organizations need to adapt constantly to these new features, so meaning making change constant and not in a static world. So this requires a brand new approach of business specificities. So as more you are standard in the system, as easy it is to maintain and to move with the cloud. Customization based on specific needs are a real challenge that bring additional burden and cost in the whole life cycle of the projects.
And that can be a real different paradigm for a company, because for decades, people running ERP projects, for example, they had as a target to take the best product in the market and to really adapt and tailor it to the specific needs of the company and really do also a lot of customization. Our number 6 are about resources. So yeah, these kind of projects are triggering a big challenge. It's finding a balance between project contribution and daily operations, which means planning internal and external resources over the project cycle without overanalyzing, which can be a mistake, and having the right conversations around that topic. How are we going to give the people the opportunity to do their job on the project? Then these are projects that touch really core application that enable our business processes. The question comes up really frequently and the hard way. What if it doesn't work? That really triggers an anxiety that can lead to exaggerated reactions. And those reactions are little on both sides of the spectrum. You may have on one side a general feeling of risk without any background, without any analysis behind that, or other people that would do really over analysis without a sense of the criticality of the risk. So a big potential generator of anxiety.
Yeah, so those projects really increase the personal exposure of the project team member, and it's really not to underestimate. So people need to challenge themselves and answer the question, what's in for me to go the extra mile and take personal risk? Why do I do it? Is it worth the risk taken?
Mm-hmm. And questions also about what happens next. If I'm for a long period of time on a project, what will happen to my career afterwards? So
yeah, that's also kind of question on what happens if the project is failing and so on. So it's a huge exposure and some kind of personal risk to assess.
Okay, so you need a structured approach to address complex and emotional projects. Here at Julhiet Sterwen, we use the 5-lens change design framework that you see on that slide. Those 5 lenses represent 5 different perspectives, 5 different ways to look at the same project. It doesn't come as a surprise that on top of the list you will find the people lens. It's about cohesion, engagement, creating a collective dynamic. And we'll talk a lot of that about that later, because we're going to focus our webinar on that subject. Let's look quickly at the other lenses. On big projects, you need to make documented choices, so you need good data. And that's the analysis lens, where we are going to do segmentations, we are going to assess impacts, risk, explore options, in order to be able to design a path and appropriate change actions. Our third lens is a governance lens, where we are going to reflect about how to organize ourselves, to define roles, give clarity, define responsibilities, and facilitate decision making. Also, make sure that we align all stakeholders on a clear vision and path, also through very precise change roadmaps. The fourth lens is the communication lens, and that's all about talking to the people with sense, meaningfully. It's all about giving meaning to the change and share the clear direction, and also, very important, to give actionable information at the right moment. The fifth lens is about adoption, and there I can say that nowadays change management specialists work in a very different way than what we did before, where a decade ago still people were trying to create a sense of urgency to launch people into the project. Neuroscience show that that is completely ineffective, and what we try to do in adoption is to shrink the change, make it smaller, easier for the people to do the next step, and we do so by co-construction, exploring options together, test and learn, and training. So this framework comes with a set of change activities that are related to the streams and tools. And today we chose to focus on the people stream and discuss about this project at Kudelski. What was our experience with the people streams? Michel, there is a useful tool to check the impact that change actions will have on engagement. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So this tool is called the CAFE tool, like certainty, autonomy, fairness, and empathy. So quickly a word on every 4 of them. So certainty, it's to give clarity, sharing vision, objectives, and planning to the team, and explain what will change and what will remain stable. Autonomy is all around defining an objectives and gives the team the opportunity to define way to reaching that objective. So gives them some autonomy of decisions. People can do their own choice within a given framework. Fairness is to give the option to everybody to express themselves in the project, have access to all information, and share this information quickly, as broadly as possible to the entire company. And the last one, empathy, it's designing projects that encourage collaboration and favor human interaction instead of digital interaction.
Okay, so let's try to connect that to our focus areas in the people stream. So we all know that our project will be done with and by the people. They are at the heart of the project. They will dedicate a lot of energy and they need to be strong together. They will, for sure, they will go through stressful times. I think we have a lot of examples also in that project. They will need to have overcome obstacles, and some of them may not have relevant project management experience or project experience in project of some size. So it makes sense to care about them, about people in the first place. That's why we show this image. It's like throwing a stone in the water, because that's going to start something that will spread, just like those concentric circles that we see. So Michel, coming back to your project, what was the critical move to get started?
So I definitely recommend as a first move to care about the project team, to strengthen the team itself. In order for a team to perform, you need trust, and trust is not naturally given to everybody. So you need to build that trust within the project team, and it's even more important, like in our case, where we had people coming from different companies, different countries, different cultures, external and internal people, so different backgrounds and so on. So if we were not able to build that trust between that team, then of course the project will be misfunctioning and we will hit the wall. We should always keep in mind that trust is not given at the beginning of a project. It needs to be cultivated.
Yeah, that reminds me of one of our projects. It was an international project where a freshly created team just came from different organizations from everywhere in the world, and they decided just to work from scratch without barely knowing each other. So the team members had not taken the time to know each other a little bit better, have the right conversations and a knowledge that they have very different ways to operate. And what happened is that the major conflict developed between two of the stakeholders that was clearly linked to the cultural background of each of them, and the cultural background expressing itself in ways of working. We had one of the stakeholders saying, well, I sent you a very detailed email just as we have defined in the process. And the other stakeholder answering, I didn't even look at your email. For such an important matter, I would expect you to have to give me a call. So that's really an example where missing trust allow some irritants that may be small in other moments of your life, but in that under stress, they can really make that develop in something that can bring a real problem into the project. So the question is, how do we build trust in a team? We already talked about that it's essential in order to get started in the project, but how do we build it? So on our side from neurosciences, we know that it's about having the right conversation with the right people. And at Julhiet Sterwen, we often use a very simple but efficient workshop that we call the Get to Know meeting. And that's a workshop where people, the team comes together and people start one-to-one to interview themselves around three very simple questions. What is your background and current position in the company? Why are you participating in the project? What are your hopes and expectations? And what are the skills, motivations, and strengths that you will bring into this project? And these kind of modalities, as an example, give everybody the opportunity to express themselves. So that creates empathy. If we link it to the cafe model, they are doing that collectively at the same time, sharing things. So that gives a sense of fairness. And through this interaction, we also explore the vision where we are going to. So that gives a sense of certainty and alignment on a path. And the identification of the skill sets and putting that into the context of a team and collective strengths, as well as contribution areas for everybody, that prepares the ground for increased autonomy for each team member.
Yeah, exactly. This gives the opportunity at the early stage of the project to do two important things. Identify and enhance the collective strengths of the team, but also check that the critical business and technical area are fully covered. And the idea is that if something is missing, then the whole team should go and shop for talents. So it's a collective action.
That's a good point. Yeah, the fact that the team recognizes collectively that it needs to incorporate a new team member, that creates also extra bonds within the team. So Michel, tell us a little bit about your experience with the project team. What were your specific challenges and what worked to build the trust?
So we try to maximize the face-to-face meeting and on-site interaction. Meaning, so if we have a meeting with 1 people remote, 10 people in the building, we force the people to come to the meeting room and not stay in the office because it's 10 meters away and it's convenient for them to do something different. So we want really people focusing into the meeting and having the face-to-face as much as possible. This with the fact that we need to have disciplined in keeping a regular checkpoint with the team, even if some weeks there is less to explain, but keep the pace to maintain contact. Another important point that we had to take into account during the life of the project is a clear RACI. So defining who is in the driving seats, who is responsible, who needs to be informed, and so on. And those actions will evolve during the life of the project. At the beginning of the project, you are more in the technical role, getting specification. So it might be an IT in the driving seats. When it comes to giving a training on how finance is working, then it should be the finance stream lead who should take the lead. So the RACI is evolving during the life of the project. And really another important point is having the backfill discussion. All people active in the project team are doing this normally on top of their usual operation. You need to find a balance between those activities and the project. So clearly allocates time for them to work on the project, but this means also how do they continue to do their day-to-day operation. And skipping that kind of discussion will result in frustration and disengagement. It's a matter of fairness towards the people to take into account that they're accumulating 2 jobs. And it's very important that the management is involved in those discussions to understand the pros and cons of backfilling or not and what risks they are taking on the day-to-day operation and or the project, depending on which one has a higher priority.
Okay. So let's ask also the opinion, the feedback, and the experience of our participants. So now it's your turn. The question we would like to ask you is, how did your organizations manage backfilling? Very simple. 1, generate well. 2, generate poorly. You should be able to see the pop-up on the right. So while you answer, we'll just proceed and come back to that later when we have the results from the poll. So Michel, please just go on with the elements that allowed to build trust.
So there are a few elements that you can do. So first, you need to co-construct and regularly discuss the roadmap. Ask for feedback on the team. So do not decide by yourself without implication of the project team. You need to involve them to get their input, and it's an overall not decision, but putting the data on the table, and then the management can decide which way. But at least everybody was able to express themselves. The other point to build trust and know each other is to celebrate achievement. So it could be an apéro, a dinner, just a small booklet with photo and anecdote around the project. That's what we did. So to remember the good and bad moment we had around the life of the project. So it's really to celebrate and thank the people for their involvement into the project.
That's a tap on the shoulder moment.
Exactly.
Okay, that's good. So we have the results from our poll, and that's quite overwhelming. Because more than nearly 90% of our participants say that generally backfilling was managed quite poorly. So that's an interesting insight. Thanks everybody to have answered to that poll. So if we come back to backfill, because we didn't cover that from your point of view, how would you let's say that backfilling or this issue was managed in your project, Michel?
So we tried to have a full backfill of the position of the people, and unfortunately we couldn't get it. So we managed to have a management decision that people could be involved at 50 or 60% into the project, and the rest on the day-to-day operation. And we saw that this is not working well because operation or business issue always take the highest priority compared to the project. So I would really recommend to push to get a full dedication of people to the project. Otherwise, you will have delay in the project that can hurt the deployment.
Mm-hmm. And I think also for the change teams, that an important takeaway, think about how to reinforce that message also towards management early on in the stage of the project, where you can still do real backfilling at a quite logical cost, and probably it's worth as a change management community to think about how we can work in a more productive way together to make management take full consciousness of that issue. So I think we covered quite well our first circle. So Michel, tell us a little bit about the second concentric circle. Once the team was strengthened on the road.
So once you have a good project team, you need to take the pulse of the organization. We need to reach out, or let's say the project team needs to reach out to the organization and perform what we call the quick 360 scan through ice-breaking interview with a selected number of stakeholders. This helps to gather information, so certainty of our CAFE model. The data, it's really needed to create a clear view on the situation and the direction to go. It also covers the empathy because we are listening to the people, and you can do this with first a mini comp kit explaining the project as an integration. It's good if you have an elevator pitch, so in 1 or 2 sentences, the highlights of the project itself and why you're doing it.
To give the interviewee the context of why you are reaching out to him or her to ask those questions.
Yeah, and making those interviews allow the team to understand how the stakeholder is positioning himself to the project. Is he supportive? Is it neutral? He does not care? He's negative? And based on all those feedback, you can then adapt the way you manage interaction with all of them, because you won't go to discuss the same way with somebody who is supportive or somebody who is negative on the project.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that through these interviews, and in order to introduce the interviews, you had to produce a little comp kit. So basically, you started really to communicate very early on in the project.
Correct. Yeah, we started just even before starting the specifications themselves to communicate to the main stakeholder in the company what's going to happen.
That's important and very seldom. I can say that because our experience is that especially on IT projects and maybe because IT people often are perfectionists, so they want to communicate when the plan is very well designed structure, or when the solution is already at a good mature state. So they tend to communicate very late and often too late on projects. But coming back to these interviews, Michel, who performed those interviews?
So we had a mix between external consultants and internal people from the project team or the sponsor of the team.
Yeah. Well, I remember having done some of the interviews by myself, and what is your opinion on that matter? Pros and cons of going as an internal to make the interviews, or having an external consulting doing the interview?
So having external doing the interview help us to overcome some political discussion. To avoid the hierarchy pressure if somebody of the project team is interviewing his manager or the manager of his manager. But it also help the project team to start blending with the stakeholder. So you need both in the same meeting, and you can choose between who is asking which question. and maybe the more political tricky one, you give it to the external guy because it does not risk anything, and the internal just stay a low profile on those one, but it starts to bind with the stakeholders. So a good mixed would be my recommendation.
Mm-hmm. And we decided also some interviews to be done only by external people to have a completely unbiased feedback from the stakeholders. Good. These ice-breaking interviews were performed at the very beginning of the project. However, we know very well that there is a permanent need to take the pulse of the organization and to have touch points with your stakeholders. So how was that done, Michel?
So we identified at the beginning of the project who are our main stakeholder, and we did a mapping exercise where they stand with our sponsor and the change team. The objective of this was to give the right visibility and treat them fairly all around the project with face-to-face meeting or information, as we wanted to avoid that they discover important information in informal meeting. So we had to propose them options before, so going to see them in advance and not put them in the fact right at the meeting. And don't forget that your sponsor is your main stakeholder, that you need to use him when you need. And the fact that he most of the time is supportive, it does not mean I need neglect him. So I need to inform him all along the project cycle, and not only when I need decision.
Mm-hmm. So that's the idea of being very consistent in our stakeholder management and disciplined also.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So in practical terms, how did you do that?
So we had a list of stakeholders with a cluster with an action plan, regular contact point, and every week we should have asked us what I have done for my stakeholders this week. Do I have any blind spot with them? Mm-hmm. So that's two small tricks that you can ask you every week to help you managing this interaction.
Okay. So Michel, let's go to our third concentric circle.
Yeah. So the third one, you have started with the project team, enhanced with the main stakeholder, and then it's the rest of the organization. So how to reach the whole organization? We activating ambassador networks because sending just an email to all staff will not do the job. We think people read emails. You gave an example before. Not everybody is reading their email. So that's why we created two main network. One is the Club des 100 and the other one is the regional ambassadors.
So Club des 100, Club of the 100.
Club des 100, sorry.
And what kind of people participated in that Club of the 100?
So Club of the 100 is in fact an extended project team where we added several people from the organization for every department and geography worldwide. We call it Club the 100 because there were roughly 100 people in that club. And why we did this? Because this allows to complement the input of the representative of the project team within the project and to create a direct connection with a wider organization. So increasing the fairness and the certainty. Mm-hmm. How we did this is that we had information, previews, informal demos. We had a monthly webinar, if you want, with the entire project team presenting status, where we stand, doing demos, and not only one guy on stage every time. Mm-hmm. So it shows also the cohesion of the project team. We try to do it physical location if possible, to have everybody in the same room. As being a worldwide company, we have also people remotely. So we had a two-way interaction through Skype meetings, so they could hear, see the content, and they could ask questions through a chat also to get their input taken into account. And of course, at the end of every meeting, we had a little survey to take the pulse of the broader project team to see how the project is going. Our experience is that those people really acted as relay in the company, and they fed us with interesting insights that most probably the project team would not be aware if they were restricted to the core team of that project.
Okay. You also mentioned the regional ambassadors network.
Yeah, the regional ambassadors is people in the regions that has helped us to complement the Club des 100 and came maybe a little bit later on the project when it was mature and it was time to prepare the regional deployment. One of the major added value is the input they gave us on local specificities for training preparation, for example. They improve the adequacy of the proposed training journey thanks to the good knowledge of people on site. You can have in one region difference between one region to another with title rows, and that we cannot see just on the annuaire. So you really need to get deep insights from the region to address them correctly. Of course, they give us good input of optimizing training and rollout logistic, creating synergies on blackout period, traveler, and so on. And they also give us meaningful insights on how to communicate to those specific regions, because some were more email reading, others were more in meetings, and so on. So we could adapt our communication and training based on their feedback.
Sometimes local details make a big difference. It's true that I've seen many times in big multinational trading stations organized, and one of the participating countries said, well, that's in the middle of our national holiday. And, but nobody had thought at the headquarters to check that kind of logistic details. Okay, so let's summarize our main insights in engaging with the people. So first of all, strengthening the team. That was about building trust to enhance collaboration from the very start, and very big recommendation, start to invest time to build trust within your team. Then taking the pulse of the organization, two aspects to this, reaching out to the organization very quickly with a team and perform a 360 scan to gather information and to create first contact points with stakeholders. Then engage with your stakeholder and manage them consistently throughout the project. And then we talked about the ambassadors networks. They are extremely useful to multiply your efforts, so you get valuable insights and you multiply your connection and touch point with the organization, and that makes a real difference. So I think we are through the main body of the webinar, and that's the moment where we could take the question and hopefully try to have also some answers. Let me see. I need to scroll down. It's okay. So we have a question regarding the ambassadors. Were they the only voice of the project in the region, or did you have other touch points with the regions?
So yeah, the ambassador were the first point of relay in information in the region, but of course this is not enough. The project team, or including the management, should travel to the region to show that they are part of the project. It's not that the headquarters is just throwing away and say, okay, you do what we decide and we don't care about you. So people are important, so showing the management coming, so management of the project, I mean, to the region to explain the project, to answer questions, it's really important. We also wanted to have our sponsor, when he was traveling worldwide for business reasons, that he could stop in the regional office and also give a speech about the project. So regional ambassador is good, but you need to go out to the region to meet the people and to show that they are important to the company.
One aspect I remember very strongly on that project is that the regional ambassadors gave us so valuable input on the specificities of the various roles that were very different from region to region, and they expressed themselves very strongly towards the need to be properly trained. That was extremely helpful then to go and meet another stakeholder based in the region, the head of region.
The head of
And
region.
on that project, I would say that these insights helped us negotiate very, very early on in the project a strong commitment of the company to do very, very good training. And that I think was very important in that project, and would not have been possible without the insights from your network.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really important to take the specificity of the different region into account in order not to be, even if it's one solution, it needs to fit all needs. So every region is different, so take them into account.
Okay, here I can see we have a second question. By the way, if you have other questions, don't hesitate. You can still use the chat button. It should be the second button on the right, and just type in your question. We'll see it live. So, second question, Michel. You talked about stakeholder management. Could you tell us more about the profile of those stakeholders and how you manage them?
Yeah, so we had really the main stakeholder we defined at the beginning. It's mainly the management of the company. So you had head of development, you had CFO, you had, let's say, head of different more specified part like accounting or controlling or manufacturing that are more the back-end function also. And this is really where you need to discuss and manage them differently, because a guy will not speak the same way as a production people or even a manager. The CFO will not have the same technical detail. He'll not going into the same kind of discussion that somebody who is doing the job day to day. So you really need to adapt the way you discuss and the level of discussion to the profile and the level of he's staying within the company.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and yeah, on that topic, there's another interesting insight. There are some roles that you find interesting from a stakeholder management point of view, and usually you find them in every company. One of those roles is the executive assistance of the VIP in the company. That is a role that often performs a lot of activities on behalf of their manager, and also due to their position are people that are really in contact with the various business areas and in direct contact with the various business areas. So they are top influencers, and they deserve special attention, probably a special treatment, since they can give you also very directly the pulse of your project, and you can also enroll them a little bit in an ambassador role that will spread directly towards management.
Yeah, you're totally right. Admin or executive assistants are playing a central role, because if they are happy, they will propagate happiness to the management and to the other people. And if they are not happy, as they're talking to the entire company, they will be like a negative asset for the project. Mm-hmm. So you're totally right. Executive assistants are part of our main stakeholder and needs to be treated as the other one.
Okay, good. Maybe another question. It's about the risk and the anxiety that the team that can come up in the team due to the risk. What was your experience, Michel, on that part of managing potential risks?
So yeah, those are really risky projects as they are touching the entire execution within the company. If they're going wrong, then you can stuck the company. You cannot deliver, you cannot invoice. So if you know invoicing, there is no money coming in. So the pressure is really huge, and you need to do risk assessment. You cannot go into every details for sure, because otherwise you're just becoming crazy as there's too many. But you need to take the main risk in account and have a plan B. What if it's not working? Do we have a plan B? Okay, no. So then maybe we need to postpone. Or okay, what is the level of risk and so on. So we have a risk matrix that we reviewed every month to be sure, and it's evolving along the project, because it's not the same risk at the beginning that the day you are deploying. And of course, you need to take some hypercare once we're going live to be sure that people are ready to take the risk, no, not the risk, the issue right away, and to fix it in order not to block the company. So it's really stressful for the people. So that's why you need to take care of them, celebrate when it's possible, and be kind with your people. Otherwise, your project will be a failure. So people are really at the center of those projects.
And just on that risk issue, but I remember also sessions where having a meaningful discussion and discussing the criticality part helped a lot, taking the pressure out, because when sometimes people put a lot of pressure on themselves without real reasoning. So when you go through that kind of conversations and you question the criticality of the risk, then you have the good discussion, and that goes this way. Well, if that and that happens, then I will not be able to do that and that. And then when you are in a discussion, the other person can ask, so what? Well, then that and that happens. And so what? And usually after two so what questions, you put this topic on the right level of criticality. And often in that project, I used also because we don't have retail at Kudelski, I said, okay, in a retail project, if something doesn't work and it happens in the shop, then you have 50 people in the line, and then you have a real problem. But for you, if you're finance people and this report is not going to work, what is the risk? What is really going to happen?
Yeah, it's really important to see the impact to the company, because every issue within one stream is a major issue of the project. And maybe you realize that not having an invoice paid one day, but the day after, it's not a big issue for the company. Not having the production running for one day, and you maybe need a million of smart cards that are not going out, so you cannot deliver. So the criticality, it's really company-wide that need to be addressed, and not small stream by stream.
Okay. We take last questions. How can these recommendations be applied to companies scaling up?
So if I understand correctly, the question is, how can we bring on people that are arriving after the start of the project? So companies that you...
Is it that, or scaling up is maybe if the size of the company is bigger and bigger and bigger?
So then you need to put constant communication, up-to-date training, so that people that growing can join and get all the historical of the project, why it was done, and so on. And onboard them with webinar and that's on.
No, I see. Kenzo is so she meant that the company is growing very rapidly, and the employees can't catch up with the pace of the growth, and probably the new business models that are deploying.
That's a good question. So we didn't face that issue.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe Stefan, you have any idea, because we didn't fetch it.
Yeah, that's. I think that's something we have addressed in our project, because we had to think about how can we go into a sustainable mode once the project team will be some of the project team will be leaving the company. And we faced the same kind of questioning because, as Michel said previously, nowadays, every 6 months, you have a full update. So a lot of new things, new functionalities, and you have to find a way to be quite agile in your way to bring the people up to speed on new potential functionalities, new things, and that is a question for us of setup, preparation, which means that you have to direct your team into that state of mind, prepare things for the people, and be ready in a very light mode to show to go to the essential factors and show, look, now, today, this month, this 2 months, this 3 months, this 6 months, we have this kind of new potential. Use the 80-20 rule and say, I will concentrate my efforts on what will make a difference to the company, and communicate, train in nuggets the people on the very essential things that are going to make a difference. And there are a lot of ways to do that, but I think that's would be my takeaway for how to scale up in nowadays world. Michel, want to add something?
No, I totally agree with you.
That's a very, very good thing. I like that very much. So thank you very much to everybody that followed this webinar. Just a little message for those of you who are passionate and really interested by transformation, change management topics. We created a few months ago the Change League, where we do different activities. We're doing one big event every year that we are going to announce very soon for this year, but we try to have some webinars and other activities on change topics. So if you are interested in that, you can join the Change League, and we'll have the link for registration in the feed. So if you want to look that up, we'll be pleased to find you again in the next event. So from Michel and myself, thanks everybody.
Thank you everybody, and hope to see you in another webinar.
Of course. Thanks a lot, and bye-bye.